Welcome back. Tommy, you grew up in an orphanage in northern New South Wales, yourself and your sister.
Yes.
How did you end up there?
My mother ran away, couldn't cope with us two children.
You were very young at this stage.
I was 2, my sister was 4. So she went, I mean, this is tough, this is. She left us in a room, took a train to nowhere. My father come home, quickly went to the train station with us children to try and get her, but she'd a bit long gone. He coped with us for a few more days, and then he obviously didn't care for us, or couldn't care for us, I'm not too sure. So he took us to the Anglican church home and left us there. Now and again he used to come up and visit, but after that he never come back. Never saw him or our mother again to this day.
What do you remember? What's your earliest memories of being in that orphanage?
It was brutal. The earliest memories, I suppose as a child, you didn't know too much, but by the time you were 4 or 5, you knew what was going on. It was just brutal to look around and see people getting flogged and beaten and pushed and shoved and dragged out of the room by the hair. Growing up, seeing that, and then actually happening to yourself and your sister was pretty daunting. It was a hellhole. It's full of blood and fury and nasty people. Clergy that flogged children with belts. Clergy who sexually abused children. Clergy who let the abuse happen. People, the hierarchy let it happen. You know, kids are walking around with bruises. Kids are walking down with welts and belt marks across their body. Did someone see that? No, they didn't. I was in that home for 14 years, and 10 of those years are brutal, abusive, not good.
I appreciate you actually being willing to talk to us about this.
It's okay.
It seems to me, and we've spoken about this fairly extensively, that this was a kind of behaviour that was accepted, that was part of life in the orphanage, that nobody ever had any aspirations for it to change, and the people in the hierarchy, the people running the home, the church that was supervising, were either part of the abuse that you suffered, or weren't even remotely interested in trying to stop it or put an end to it or find out why it was occurring in the first place. It's hard for me to even understand how that could even exist. And it was back in the 60s, it was a long time ago, and a lot of advances have been made and a lot of improvements have been made and a lot of help has been offered to people such as yourself. But nonetheless, this is a hierarchical system that was allowed to continue, maybe flourish is the wrong word, for many years, and hundreds of children suffered this all across the country, all across the world.
Yeah, sure.
And yet there you were right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
How do you survive that, let alone physically, but how do you survive that mentally every day? How do you keep moving forward, trying to establish a normal life when we take into the fact that you and your sister have been abandoned? I can't even begin to put myself into the frame of mind that you must find in order to be able to continue every day.
These days? You mean today?
Even back then, I mean,
back then it was part of your life then. You expected to be hit, pushed, shoved, belted. It was just a matter of how hard and how much they believed that you played up. It's all right for people to say, well, those sort of things happened in those days. Of course they did. They happen everywhere. They happen these days. It's just, but in a church home, you know, I didn't understand then, but now I do. But these people were just violent people. They should not have been there in the first place. Those ministers should have been gone. They should have been flogged themselves. you're hitting, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old children. And mind you, when some of the children got older, as in, say, 13 and 14, and they probably might have grown big or strong, and because they might have been able to fight back, they were taken from the home in the still of the night. You'll wake up and you'll see a bed empty and one of the children had been taken away somewhere. No one knew. So every child lived in fear that they would be next to be taken. So you just had to grin and bear it. You had to try and escape the abuse. You had to try and be good. You had to make sure your bed was proper, but it never worked. They just wanted to hit. They used belts, pony whips, electrical cords. In fact, there was a tree down the back. They'd sent a child down in the backyard to pull a twig off a tree, a real flexible twig, and they would flog the child with that twig across the legs or across the bum or the back. But it seemed that they all thought they had to do that. And some in particular thought they had to abuse the children sexually. So whether it was like that in those days, it should never have been like that any year. You don't get over it.
No, you don't get over it. Do you find some understanding of what it was, the systems that were put in place that allowed this to continue to prosper? Can you look back and go, if they hadn't been doing that or willing to allow that to happen, then the situation might have been different? Because as we said, it sort of started at the top and worked its way bottom and was kind of learned behaviour on the people who were working there. They were taught that this is the way you dealt with the children, this is the kind of discipline that you were expected to use in order to make the children compliant.
Yeah, yelling and belting. No softness.
No love, no compassion.
No love, no compassion, no hugs. Just stand in the corner on one leg for an hour. And if you fall down, we'll flog you. One particular time that I should tell you about, and is some of the boys used to be lined up near the bed to recite certain parts of the Bible, etc., etc. And one day I was asked to recite the Apostles' Creed. Do you know it?
I may have learned bits of it.
Yeah, well, I knew it, but this particular day the matron was there, was a particularly brutal lady, and I froze. And she kept at me and she kept at me, and the more she kept at me, the more I said, no. And then she attacked me. She grabbed me under the arm, used a belt, and flogged me across the back. Only stopping when she was exhausted, actually. So I fell to the floor. Now, you can't cry. The more you cried and the louder you cried, the more she'd hit you. So you tried to just keep it in. So you whimper. There's nothing else you can do. And that happens. I've still got the strap marks on my back today. They're still there. On that floor was blood. And if any child went to help you while she was in the room, they'd cop a beating too. I'm not saying they'd be flogged and beaten to death, but they would be smacked and hit for trying to help that child. So everyone had to stand back, order to bed. They'd go out and close the door, lock you behind the bars. Now, how can you do that? It doesn't make sense.
Often think about these things and wonder if there was some kind of perception that in their own minds that they believed that the children needed to be punished because of the inadequacies of their parents and their inability to care for their children for whatever reason. And then finding yourself in the orphanage actually means that you need to incur the wrath and to be purified or
You're
to be
in there
made clean, or
You're in there because you're bad,
yeah,
not because your mother and father parted, or your mother and father died,
yeah,
or your mother and father. There's no mother and father. I don't know. It's a hard one to answer that one. I just don't really understand. You know, you could be a child that come in one day, the next day you've been beaten.
yeah.
So, what for? How can you beat a child for wetting the bed when the child doesn't know any difference?
Mm.
And then they wrap the seats around them and parade them up the dormitory for everyone to see, to say this is what's going to happen to you. Around your head like a mummy and down your body. And then you're told to go in. You can't do that to a child. There's no sense in it. None whatsoever. There's no answers to it. None.
And yet it kept happening.
Those miserable people. It kept happening.
Mm.
It kept happening even after I left. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And, you know, I don't know. I'm never going to get over this. What do you do? Forget about it? Go to a shrink? You can't do anything. It's just the way it is.
And I'm guessing that you've probably tried every method available to you to try and get over it and move on.
Counsellors, and psychologists and counsellors, yoga, deep breathing. It's always there. Nothing's going to get rid of those.
Yeah.
That pain, the anguish you suffered in that time there. You cannot get over it. You know, someone's going to tell you to, you know, look ahead and look at the stars and all that. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
You were beaten and beaten, and you'll never forget that.
Something you think about every day?
Every day of my life. Try not to. So I had to find out, didn't I? Later on in life I had to find out who had the rights to hit the children and who had the responsibility to the home. Who had the responsibility to protect the children. There must have been someone to sign a licence. They were supposed to, you sign a protection, a letter of protection.
As part of you being at the orphanage, yeah.
But
never happened.
Never happened.
When we come back, we'll delve further into Tommy's fight with the church and his attempts to bring the abuse inflicted on him, his sister and the other children at the orphanage to the wider attention of the public. This is Turning Points.